Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Snort, snort, snort.
Kogan. Drip.
Snort, snort.
I got the drip. Go.
So, in an interview with Variety magazine, Neil Druckmann talked a ton about his upcoming season 2 of The Last of Us TV show. And essentially, that was like the focus of the interview, okay? Now, I'm not a huge fan of these entertainment magazines, especially these Hollywood-centric media things. I'm reading this story from Variety. Okay, here it is. And it is so long-winded and wordy, and they basically beat around the bush so much. It's like, just get to the point. Why do you take so long to try to say something of any substance? They reiterate points everyone already knows. They rehash nonsense. Like, just get to a point, all right? So there's a lot of stuff that's said in this article. To summarize the article, The Last of Us 2 TV show is coming out soon. I think it's in the next month or two. And basically, they are outright admitting they have completely changed elements from the game to make the show work, whatever that means. And basically, Neil Druckmann is like, he's a little worried that there may be fan backlash for the changes that were made. But at the same time, he's kind of come to peace in terms that he had to make these changes. He did this with season 1, and everyone liked it. And so I think they were saying like the actual like director of the show was convincing him, listen, no, the changes are going to be worth it. It's going to, So essentially the whole article is kind of about season 2 of The Last of Us show. I really don't give a shit about that. To be frank with you, I don't. Season 1 was just okay. Some parts were really good and almost really close to the game. Other parts couldn't have been further from the original game and were completely added on as filler content and fluff to push agendas. It's like I said, in a nutshell, I don't mind the episode that's about the side character who had a, gay relationship with a guy and their story of how they survived for many, many years in the abandoned town and all of that. It's actually a good story. It's well acted. It's well written. It's great. It also has nothing to do with The Last of Us. It's literally wedged in there to say, hey, look, we're open to homosexuality and we think that this is okay. So we're going to do a whole episode about it, even though it's nothing to do with the actual story. You can literally remove that episode from season 1 of The Last of Us, watch the rest, and it's just as good, if not better, because it doesn't feel like you just watched a filler episode. Okay? Like I said, what they should have done with that episode is actually done a spin-off series of maybe here's the side characters from the show and here's their stories, and it would have been fine. Instead of forcing it to be an actual episode. Like, boring. It really was. Like, I liked the story. I didn't want it in The Last of Us, okay? So what they did is kind of similar to other games and things. They're wedging in these liberal themes to try to say, oh, see, we're changing a society and we're accepting now. Yeah, but what does that have to do with The Last of Us? Anyway, with that being said about season 1, I'm curious what Druckmann is talking about when he's saying they had to make all these changes to season 2 and people might have issue with them, but he's not afraid of it anymore. I'm very curious. Like, what did they change? Because for those who don't know, The Last of Us 2, which is what season 2 of the show is based on, is very controversial. In the first few hours, the main character of the first game dies, okay? And he was everyone's favorite character, and he's just eliminated. And then the story becomes a two-sided story of one person who was the villain, but telling her backstory, and you're being forced to play her story to understand her. And then the revenge story of Ellie, the essentially surrogate daughter or whatever of Joel, and how she's going to get revenge for his murder. So it's a very, very brutal, dark, not very pleasant story about two people trying to get revenge and trying to kill each other and many others along the way. So already it's controversial. Like, really, the story is highly controversial. And a lot of people didn't like it, including me. I described The Last of Us 2 as, 20 hours of torture porn. That's what it feels like. The entire game is miserable. At no point is there any situation where it feels like there's something that is pleasant or happy or fun. You don't get a sense of accomplishment or anything good. It's just very, very negative, very dark, very dismal stuff. So with that being said, in my opinion, okay, I didn't like The Last of Us 2 because of the story. Everything else I liked. I liked the gameplay elements, the graphics, but the story wasn't very good. So this whole article being, well, we even changed the story of The Last of Us 2 to make The Last of Us Season 2. What did he change? Right? I'm very curious about this. I think we're all going to be paying attention when the show comes out, see what did he do now, right? But in reality, that's not even the reason I'm bringing this up today, okay? The reason I'm actually bringing this up is because at the tail end of the article, there's a few things that are brought up, okay, that are very, how can I say, interesting and or telling, and I think that we should just review them briefly. So number one, no matter who the showrunners cast as Abby, they're bound to spark controversy. The character's stacked physique and brutal story arc placed her at the center of a torrent of online vitriol when hackers leaked hours of footage from Part 2 in April of 2020. As Druckmann and his co-writer Hallie Gross, the voice actors and the team at Naughty Dog scrambled through COVID isolation to make the game's June release, and Druckmann continued to work on Season 1, they were inundated with anti-Semitism, misogyny, homophobia, and death threats to themselves and their families. It's called online trolling, okay? It's called online trolling. I'm still amazed that in the middle of it all, we could get on a Zoom and we talk about how to make the television show. And here he was just like, okay, I'm compartmentalizing. That world goes away. Now we work on the show. I wouldn't have been able to get out of bed. So because they were getting online trolling, because they basically ruined the plot of The Last of Us with the second game and the plot leaked, they were having mental breakdowns. Okay. I just want to get this straight. So you made one of the best video games of all time. Everyone loved it, right? Absolutely amazing. You decide to make a sequel that's completely different in tone, that you actually are purposefully misadvertising as having Joel as the lead when he'll be dead within hours of the game being, being playable. It's a completely different style of game, completely different tone. Your plot leaked and people are angry at you because the plot sucks. And so they trolled you online. Now, I'm not condoning anti-Semitism, death threats, or anything like that. Okay, I'm not. But it's online trolling. And you can't sleep? I can't work because people said The Last of Us 2 sucks. Maybe it does. Did you ever think of that? That maybe when you go against everything you wrote in the first game to try to get shock value for your second game, that maybe people have a point. That maybe when you throw away something that everyone loves just because you think that it's going to get you attention, that maybe that's a bad take, that maybe that's a bad idea, that maybe people would be upset with you because of it. Maybe you should see how upset people are and be like, oh, fuck, we made a big mistake. Instead, he literally did the opposite. During 2020, Druckmann came out publicly and said, everyone that doesn't like The Last of Us 2 is a bunch of bigots. You guys are just sexist, racist. You hate everything that has to do with liberalism, basically. And because of that, if you don't like Last of Us 2, you're a bigot. If you don't buy Last of Us 2, you're a bigot. At the end of the year, I shit you not, he said this on social media. So it's the Game Awards coming up. And remember that every vote that you give for Last of Us 2 as the viewer's choice game of the year or player's choice game of the year is a strike against the bigot. So be sure to vote for Last of Us 2 to strike against bigotry. He actually fucking said that on the internet. Everyone called him out for it. And then he had to publicly apologize and withdraw his statement and say, no, vote for the game you actually think is best. The problem with Neil Druckmann is that not only can he not take criticism, but then he uses criticism as a scapegoat to try to get more attention for himself or more success. Instead of saying, listen, The Last of Us 2 is a great game. It's a great plot. It's got great gameplay elements. Play it and enjoy it for what it is. He literally said, buy our game and make us rich because it's a feel-good movement of leftist liberalism, and you're being progressive and helping the world if you buy and play our game and vote for it for Game of the Year. And that's the horrible thing to do. Like, that's so disingenuous. It's so dishonorable. How many game devs that year worked their ass off and also put out good games? And they now, oh, well, you know, oh, that game's not a big bastion of liberalism, right? So, so anyway, this is why I don't like Druckmann. It's literally not anything to do with his games. It's his attitude and the way that he behaves himself. This almost like he thinks he's better than everyone. He thinks he's smarter than everyone. He thinks he knows better than everyone. And when someone criticizes him and says, no, you don't, you're not smarter, you're not better, your ideas are bad, he then freaks out and then tries to do this rallying call of liberalism, which is stupid as shit. And it's very dishonest, okay? So now listen, I asked Druckmann how he managed through this crisis. What crisis? Online trolling? He had a horrible crisis of people online telling him his game sucked because the plot was bad. That was his crisis. It's a life crisis for him. Not very well at the time, he says, sounding grim. I get hyper fixated on stuff. I get hyper fixated on stuff. I swear I didn't put that part into the article. So when I'm alone and I have time to think, and worse, I have time to browse, that's when it gets the most dangerous. I'm starting to doubt myself. What if I did ruin it? What if I did make a piece of shit? Well, you did. No, you actually did. People rightly criticized your hackish writing, and then you freaked out. But your game actually does suck because the plot's bad. And you have to deal with that forever. It doesn't matter how many people in games journalism kissed your ass and said your game was game of the year. The plot still sucks. And now you're making an entire TV show around the plot that sucks. So I hope he's ready, because now it's 2025. Now the pendulum has swung 5 years later. Trump is now in the White House. And worldwide, we're seeing a conservative cultural movement. If he puts out The Last of Us Season 2, the same way he put out The Last of Us Part 2, he's got a rude fucking awakening. Because even though every critic will probably say, this is the best show I've ever seen, the common person's going to say, your show is fucking literal dog shit. It is a leftist love letter, and we don't need that. We don't want that. We don't want Snow White, who's Hispanic. We don't want Last of Us 2 with liberal themes. We just want normal stories again. We don't want agendas pushed down our throat every waking moment that we have. And that's where the world has gone now. So if he's nervous, he should be. He literally should be. It's not years ago anymore. Things have changed. And he may not actually get any praise for the show outside of his butt-kissing circle. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So Craig was saying, who cares what they think? I'm telling you, it's awesome. Listen to me. So whoever this Craig is, you shouldn't have listened to them. You shouldn't have listened to them. That was awful advice. That's what we call a butt kisser. That's what we call a yes man or woman. They were not honest with you. Anyone who actually even has knowledge of narrative, like how to lay out a narrative, the structure of The Last of Us 2 was terrible. The in medias res that was used, where you started in the middle, then there's an awful thing that happens, then you go back, and then you go forward again, then you go back. It's confusing as fuck. The pacing is all screwed up. Just the basic narrative structure is bad. Then on top of that, they have the balls to say, oh, the leftist themes is why you didn't like it. No, people outright told you your narrative structure was bad and you ignored it and called them bigots. You're the disingenuous fucker who can't take criticism. So, with Mazen's enthusiasm and pep talks, as well as the support of his inner circle, Druckmann thickened his skin to the point that he doesn't think any commensurate online hatred for Season 2 of The Last of Us would upset him. I love the changes we've made. It's a different version of the story, but its DNA is in there. Maybe more than excited. I'm really curious what their reaction will be. I'm going to spoil it for you. No one's going to like it besides your friends. I'm just going to spoil it for you right now. Besides those who kiss your ass, all right, people are not going to like this show because culture has changed. This is why all the woke movies are failing. All the woke TV shows are failing. This is why people with their woke shows on CNN, the shows are getting canceled, right? Because no one wants this shit anymore. There's no market for it. So prepare your butt for utter failure, which is the complete polar opposite of what when you got your butt kissed last time with season 1. All right? But lastly, the big one, and this is what everyone's talking about, like no lie, the whole article is about The Last of Us season 2, the show, and then, but only anyone quoted this. So here's the big quote everyone wants to talk about, all right? Then there's the long whispered possibility of The Last of Us Part 3. I was waiting for this question, Druckmann says, sighing, when I bring up the prospect of a third game. I guess the only thing I would say is don't bet on there being more of Last of Us. This could be it. So I want you to think about this. Druckmann went from The Last of Us is the best thing ever, right? The video game part 1, the video game part 2. It's so good and popular. We're developing a full-fledged multiplayer game that's going to be its own entity set in the world of The Last of Us, right? Something has happened and changed so bad for this guy. He canceled the entire multiplayer game after years and millions of dollars were put into it. All he's done has made The Last of Us Season 1 the show and re-released both Last of Us 1 and 2, which didn't need re-releases. He remastered and re-released them, okay? And he's literally working on a brand new franchise that already people are ripping apart and saying, we don't want this. All right, whatever it is. I can't even remember what it's called, the one that's in space or whatever. Already people are analyzing it, dissecting it, and saying it seems like it's more of this woke bullshit that we don't want. So, you know, it's going to fail. I don't know if it'll fail. I don't know. I'm not saying that. I'm telling you what people are saying in, you know, in certain cultural circles, right? So it sounds to me like this guy basically realizes the grift is gone. The grift is done. He has one grift, and that grift is liberal themes in video games. But now the grift is drying up. The times have changed. The pendulum swung. So he's like, oh, well, we're probably done. We're probably not going to make The Last of Us 3. Really? So you're saying The Last of Us 2 is the end of the story? Because it sure didn't seem like it, right? It sure seemed like they were gearing you up for a Part 3 finale. But I guess what you do is you throw in the towel when you realize that your one-trick pony ran out of tricks. You know, and that's what it seems like. I mean, why else did he quit the multiplayer game? Because he realized it was too hard, that the multiplayer game wasn't going to be narrative focused. He couldn't sell it on leftist beliefs. So he dropped it. After trying it, oh, we're going to fail. He just quit. And now this show, well, we're going to make season 2. It's going to be different from the game. I'm going to tell you right now, if this show is not massively, widely accepted, I wouldn't even expect to hear another peep out of this guy after this next video game comes out. He's gonna go into his turtle shell and never be seen again. What's funny about this is when The Last of Us Season 1 came out, okay, he thought he was gonna be the absolute biggest shit in Hollywood. He went to these red carpet premieres and he was standing on the carpet. No one took his picture. No one interviewed him. No one even knew who he was. He is such an afterthought in Hollywood. No one cares. But he actually thought that like he was going to be well accepted. Oh, I'm going to be the video game director now because I made a liberal show, right? It's the complete opposite. No one wants anything to do with him. So, man, what a story. So here's the deal. Last of Us 3, all right? Should it even come out, you know, if they make one? I honestly, I do feel like there's more story to tell, but if there's story, it has to be a story that's not focused on, oh, we need to have it be this agenda. It actually has to be a good story, right? I feel like they could actually continue the story of Last of Us and it could be good, but you have to cut the bullshit. Stop catering to a crowd that tells you this is what we want, but it has nothing to do with the quality of the story you're writing, but instead, oh, well, look at the representation in the game. Who cares? I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what sexuality you are. I don't care if you're buff, if you're small, if you're tall, if you're short. I don't care if you're white, you know, black, yellow, purple, polka dot. I don't give a fuck about any of that. What I care about is, does the game look and play well? Does it have gameplay elements that are addictive and fun? And is the story good? And I can tell you what Last of Us 2, it checks off all those boxes except for the story. The story is ass. So come back at us with Last of Us 3 with a good story. And that's all that matters. You will have a success. But the problem is, he can't do that. If you're not aware, he didn't write The Last of Us 1. He claims he did, but the actual rumor in the industry is that most other people wrote it for him, and he did a little bit of stuff in there, and then he took credit for the whole thing. So then when part 2 came out, and it's like, wait, why is it so different? If Neil Druckmann wrote the first one and the second one, why is the second one so different? Because he didn't write the first one. He took credit for it, but he didn't actually write it. So it makes sense. Anyway, we'll see what happens. But do I have any faith that Last of Us Season 2 will be good? No. Why would I? It's all narrative based. There's no gameplay elements. There's no graphics, right? You know what I'm saying? It's just going to be the story. And the story of Last of Us 2 sucked. So if the show is that story, even if he makes changes to it, it's still going to suck. I don't think it's going to do well. I could be wrong. But as of now, I think it's going to come out. It's not going to get the praise that the first season did. He's going to go into hiding into his little cocoon because he can't handle it. And that's it. This next game will come out, probably not do so well. And we might not ever see a Last of Us 3. And that's a shame. I mean, how the mighty have fallen when you have arguably one of the biggest, best, most well-received gaming franchises on the planet. Everyone agreed Last of Us was like the epitome of what could be played on PS3. And what did they do? They ruined it. Trying to push an agenda. Pretty sad. You could have just made a good game, but I guess that's not enough anymore in the modern day. Alrighty. Well, folks, that's that.
I got the drip going. 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 It's like a faucet that's dripping. You can't make it stop. So what do you want me to do? Have a mute button that every second I'm tapping the mute button just in case I'm gonna have to clear? Like, this is what I mean. These dumb kids. This is what it is. It's dumb kids.